we have a 5-hour episode to recap, which, gonna do our best to keep that short.
Yeah.
And then we still have to do our deep dive discussion. So for you guys, the viewers, we know your time is precious. So maybe we should just go ahead and jump in and talk about the recap. And then also, if you guys are watching just this recap right now, we do cut this out as its own video. At the bottom in the comments or in the description, is the full video if you want to see our deep dive discussion, so you can check that out. But let's talk about what happened in episode 11 of Campaign 3 of Critical Role. Ooh. Do you want to start us out?
Yes, sir. And 2 really quick things before I jump in. Again, forgive us for... I'm going to try to be quick here, but like Blake said, 5-hour long episode. Want to hit the highlights. And 2, just in case anyone's OCD like me, I don't know why there's this black bar on my... I got a green screen situation happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, so just for anyone that's like triggered by that, know that I am too. I'm trying to fix it. Anyway.
Meanwhile, I can't even see it, so... Yeah.
All right. So episode 11.
Yeah.
So we pick up with basically Ira, confronting this party, asking them, why have you come to my workshop? He's being kind of
coy.
Yeah, coy with them. Mm-hmm. And Chetney says, we're looking for Gurge, and Ira laughs and kind of looks toward Gurge, is like, oh, you actually have friends? And then the rest of the party kind of, they were upstairs, kind of joined Chetney, and Ira's like, well, you found Gurge, so you can leave now. And Chetney's like, are you the Nightmare King? And he has this super creepy grin, and I think there's a cacophony of voices that start responding, and he says yeah, that's one of the names people call me. And he's like, okay, yeah, we're taking Gurge alive. And Ira's like, you'll have to take that up with Armand, because we need Gurge and his gift. Mm-hmm. And we need more volunteers, actually. And Chetney's like, volunteers for what? And Ira says, oh, don't worry, it's nothing you can offer. And Chetney's like, are you sure about that? And starts ripping off his cloak. And while this is happening, Imogen tries to read Ira's mind, but she's met with this painful mental shock in response. Mm-hmm. And he's like, no peeking, you can't look in here. And he's like, y'all are really lacking in manners. And he's like, this is such a shame. And suddenly the door upstairs slams shut. And the party is told that there's something strongly fey in his movements, but he moves like an alien, kind of very strangely. And he stands up from his stool, and he's over 10 feet tall. His arms super long, almost draping to the ground. Yeah. He's got these really creepy long fingers. I think Matt said that they're about 1.5 foot long each, and they kind of extend creepily to pluck the glowing stone that he was messing with. Right. From the table, and he tosses it to the ground, and this wave of energy comes out, and basically all the furniture in the room now animates to life, and we roll initiative. So this battle was kind of long. A lot of stuff happened. I'm gonna try to just hit the highlights here. Everyone kind of has their moments. Fern casts flaming spears, trying to damage everything. Ira casts this chain lightning ability that completely destroys 4 of them.
Yeah, it's 22 damage at level 4.
Yeah.
I think it was his first action.
Yeah. Right? It was, aside from animating the furniture. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And FCG does manage to transfer some of the suffering. He does that a few times throughout this fight. So from the jump, it's oh crap, this is a dangerous encounter. Dorian immediately casts Shatter and breaks the lock on Gurge's prison cell, so they can try to get him in on this action. And basically everyone is just trying to deal with this furniture that is attacking them. Orem does some dope fighter shit. He does a bait and switch maneuver with Imogen.
Naturally.
Increases her AC by 7, which is just crazy. And everyone's like, what? And so while this is happening, Chetney rips off the rest of his clothes, basically, except for his underwear. And he takes his chisel and kind of draws it across his pec, drawing blood. And while this is happening, Gurge transforms into a werewolf in his cell. And thanks to Dorian breaking the lock, is able to break free. The party keeps attacking the furniture. And Ira's like, okay, you know what? This is getting old. And I think Matt phrases it he's going to take the weights off. And so he says the air like shimmers around him and his limbs seem to stretch even longer. And then everyone around him basically has to make a save or else be frightened. And then a majority of the party actually becomes frightened of him, I think, except for Laudna, who is immune thanks to her dread presence. And this is maybe the highlight of the whole episode for me. Chetney looks up at Ira and, he goes, I bet you think you're real scary. You think Gurge have a gift? Well, wait do you get a load of me? And then he's talks about his shoulders popping out and like his bones cracking. And basically he too transforms into a werewolf. And
this is such an awesome moment too, because everyone was like, "Are you kidding me?"
It was so great. and on top of that, they made his character portrait transform into a werewolf, and we find out he's not a rogue; he is in fact a blood hunter. So just an awesome moment all around. And when Ira is actually struck, Matt notes that blood does not come out, but a strange mist. And meanwhile, the fighting is still going on. Fern attacks him, and he leans in and kind of smells her when she does that. And Ira's like, you smell familiar, like home, like a Callaway. And we're like, what? And
which is Fern's last name.
Right. Thank
didn't
you.
watch EXU.
And now he's starting to get angry now that like these people are actually kind of bothering him and interrupting his work. So he kind of face steps into the middle of the party, transforms FCG into a turtle, and then like attacks Dorian and knocks him unconscious. But Dorian rolls a natural 20 on his first death saving throw, and so he immediately jolts back up with 1 HP. Then Ira lashes out at Orem and also knocks him unconscious. However, Liam also rolls a nat 20 on his first death saving throw and pops back up as well. And I think he even says like, I could do this all day, channeling Steve Rogers. So the battle continues. They eventually take care of all of the furniture and then focus on Ira himself. Fern throws an ice knife at him and he catches it and he goes, "You are a Callaway." And then more battle. Then he finally face steps, teleports again, and begins channeling this like energy in his hands. And he says, this has been an absolute pleasure. But then he glances at Fern, and for some reason he stops. He stops channeling. He stops doing what he was doing, and he goes, "You know what? I hate to leave work unfinished, but I have been paid half, and good times have been had. But I have other things to tend to." And he's like, "I hope you guys survive so that we may meet again." And he dimension doors out of the room. So at this point, the party's like, "What's happening?" Like, it's chaos basically. Orem and Laudna decide to grab any papers they can from this room and the desk. It's all like disheveled alchemical supplies and papers and stuff. So they grab what they can. They do see in one of the other prison cells, there's like this large, like kind of praying mantis type creature, and Gurge is like, "Yo, don't let that out. Let's go." Ashton does inspect the device, which the central device that was in the room, and it's like sparking, and he's like, "Yo, this isn't safe. Like, we need to get out of here right now." So Dorian grabs Turtle FCG. Everyone runs back upstairs into Vali's office, back out the window. There is a wandering guard out there who sees this. He sees this crazy party, including 2 werewolves, and Chetney just growls at him, and he's like, "I'm out." And he just pieces out immediately. So they dart back to the courtyard, go back over the wall that they originally climbed over, scale that. Gurge and Chetney both transform back into their normal forms, and both are basically naked but get some clothes on. And suddenly there's this loud like hum and flash of blue, and everything goes silent for a second. And then there's this massive flash and an explosion of energy, and then these pieces of rubble begin falling from the sky, and the moon tower essentially has exploded. So they're trying to dodge the rubble, but Dorian and FCG actually take a big hit. Dorian gets knocked out. FCG gets knocked out of his turtle form, and but he heals up Dorian immediately. And they're like, "Okay, we got to get out of here, ASAP." And so that's actually where the episode goes to break. But when we return, the party is hopping on a gondola to get out of the core spire just ASAP. Inside the gondola, Lawton is asking Gurge, she's like, what experiments was he doing on you? Like, were they successful? And Gurge says that, I had to bite 3 people. They wanted to steal my lycanthropy, essentially. And he reveals that no, he did not bite Chetney. He said he was locked up for just a few days. He didn't know who the volunteers were, but they were willing volunteers, and they looked like mercenaries, sellswords, armed very, like, highly armed to the teeth. Then they kind of ask him about his history, so he goes into that a little bit, saying that he is a retired wanderer, has been living in Marquette for about the past decade, was originally from Wildmount, was part of a band of hunters, but then he caught this disease, and he was basically thin away in order to get a handle on it. The gondola arrives, and they decide to head to the Weird Way Tavern. And once they get there, they basically rent a room that is large enough for them all to stay in together, and they immediately make their way to it. Once inside, Chetney apologizes to the party for not telling them the full truth, about his werewolfness and everything, and kind of reintroduces himself as a lichen. And he reveals that Gurge is in fact not a master craftsman, and he was not helping him find a new job, but he was helping him with his lycanthropy.
Right.
Gurge used to run with this group called the Claret Orders, but he exiled himself, came to Marquette, and found a new group called the Gorgini. Now, I might be messing up with some of these names here, but they were also a group of hunters that were lichens, and they had learned to control their curse. So Gurge ran with this Gorgini group for a few years, but then said he had a falling out with the leadership. So he said basically Chetney came up and basically wouldn't stop bothering him until he finally agreed to help him out. And he reveals that he was going to introduce Chetney to someone named Ajit, but then all this craziness happened where he gets, kidnapped and everything. And also Gurge says that, I never transform in public, so I'm not sure how these people knew that I was a werewolf. And Dorian's like, you know what? Quick question. I thought lichens only transform during a full moon. And Gurge was like, yeah, it gets dicey around a full moon, but our blood magic kind of allows us a bit of control. But he does warn the party. He's like, hey, if y'all are going to be traveling with this guy when Rudis is high, he's like, watch out. Like, things get kind of crazy when that happens. And they asked Chetney if he's been a lichen long, and he says he's relatively new. But, what does that mean for someone that's over 200 years old?
Right.
And he said after he was kicked out by the glass blades in Uthadern, he was out hunting in the wild, and he got bit by a wolf and had an altercation with the wolf. He then killed this wolf, and after he did, it transformed back into a human. And so he realized that, he was bitten by a werewolf. He says he's been able to keep it at bay and exert some control. But, he came to Gurge just to learn more. Gurge basically at this point is like, yo, I've had a rough few days. I'm going to bed. Please, nobody else bother me. He's like, Chetney, the moment you stepped into my life, everything went to shit. So I don't know anything else. Just go talk to Ajit. And tomorrow I'm going to go back to my place in the woods, and you guys are not welcome to visit me.
Do not come to me.
And Fern's like, well, we helped you. Shouldn't you give us something in return? And he's like, well, what do you want? And she's like, bite me. He's like, absolutely not. I took an oath. And as he's going to bed, they actually ask him one more time about Ira, and just what he knows about Ira, what he remembers seeing. And Gurge recalls seeing Vali, and he goes, I also saw the boss. And he goes, Ira, smelled weird. He smelled like the woods. However, it was sweeter and kind of unfamiliar. And Fern's like, wait, smell me. Does it smell like me? And he's like, yeah, kind of. So they think it might be the Feywild that he was smelling. And finally, FCG asks about Armand. He's like, tell me about this boss. And Gurge is like, I don't know. I just saw people, but he was tall, handsome, well-dressed, fancy clothes, fancy jewelry, wore blue and golds. And, that's all I know. And then finally he's like, all right, leave me alone. And he goes and curls up kind of like a dog and falls asleep. Do you want to take it from there?
Yeah, sure. So basically after he falls asleep, Chetney is pretty much like, hey guys, sorry for not giving the full story, which the party knew about. They asked him 50,000 times, okay, what's going on really here? They do realize that Ruidus won't be at its peak until a couple months from now, and so we have a couple of months until they see kind of what would happen at this point. Chetney mentions that he preferred to stay with the group because he has to demonstrate that he can basically play well with others, or he sort of curiously mentions that others will come for him, hunters will come for him, which was really interesting. Fern, after being shot down by Gurge, actually mentions to Chetney, like, hey, maybe you can bite me. And Gurge, seemingly from his slumber, says, if you do it, I'll hunt you down. So presumably there's some kind of oath that's taken that says you won't pass this on to someone else. Well, as the group's talking, they also decide to go through these papers that they took from Ira, and the papers are mysteriously blank. And they try all sorts of things. Chetney's like, does anyone have any lemon juice? They try holding it over fire, and like literally nothing happens. And this thing is just oddly clear at this point. So the party decides, okay, that kind of wraps things up for the night. Like, what else do we need to think about? And they kind of all agree. They're in the Lantern district right now, and the Lantern Spire. And they kind of all agree, you know what, we should probably stay away from the core spire as best we can for the time being. Especially since a guard saw us leaving the moon tower before it exploded. Right. This is around the time where Ashton mentions, hey, if we do need to get out of town, I do have a friend of mine, really someone that I've been working for, who has a job for us. And Ashton really shares this whole heist idea that's happening in the Heartmoor, which is about probably a 5 or 6 day walk and maybe a few days on horse. Matt does mention they could rent a Simurgh, but it would be extremely expensive, and they'd have to know someone to be able to do that. So they're sort of talking this through, and they're like, okay, if we're going to do this, if we're going to get out of town, let's kind of get all the things done that we need to get done.
Yeah.
Dorian, by the way, is like, okay, well, hang on. I do not want to miss the ball. And you remember, Dorian is like the royalty kind of person, and is like, we're not missing the ball. But regardless, the party's like, okay, let's just kind of like, what are all the things we need to, I guess all the loose ends we need to tie up, so that if we were to leave for the Heartmoor, we kind of have all these things taken care of.
Right.
So they kind of go through the list. They have the bet from Gianna Hexam, which is the whole premise to go to the Heartmoor. Mm-hmm. They have the ball. Orem still needs to meet with Ashad Abregio, the anger, and Imogen still needs to go to the Starpoint conservatory to, because Estros was going to give her a letter to basically grant her entry to find out more about her gift. So they're like, okay, well, the ball's the top of the list. And also as they're trying to plan this out, the ball is what keeps coming up as like the toughest, like scheduling wise. Mm-hmm. And so they're like, okay, let's just go talk to Estros. So they go to Estros, and they sort of, like several times they've been to Estros, they sort of just, give all the info of like, here's the latest thing that's happened. And Estros is like, you guys didn't have anything to do with the destruction of the moon spire or the moon tower, right? And they're like, yeah, that was us. Like, oops. And they're like, Imogen, tell him what happened. And so Imogen does this kind of dramatic retelling of the Nightmare King. And she especially mentions that he had a teeny tiny top hat, which he didn't, but that's kind of what they envisioned.
Yeah.
And they also talk about how it was him who was causing furniture to come to life, which Estros mentions that actually the event they saw in front of the Spire by Fire wasn't the only time this has happened. It's actually happened a couple of times. He doesn't recognize Ira, but he does recognize Armand, and reveals that Armand is actually Armand Treshy of the Treshy House, which, remember, the Treshy House Masons were the ones who seemingly did some construction at the Dreamscape Theater where the mimic was seemingly planted.
Yeah.
And the party starts to surmise like maybe Armand is creating like these sort of chaotic moments around town. Like, we've heard rumors of people saying that town's really like going south, and that maybe the Paragon's Call is this band of mercenaries that's potentially in his pocket. And he's basically he's creating all this insanity to make a power play to really put himself in control.
Yeah.
Or something to that effect. And I think it's Laden who says maybe these three people who were bit by Gurge, potentially they were of the Paragon's call. We don't really know, but that's really what they were thinking about.
Right.
So Estros does mention the ball's in 5 days. So it seems like it's going to be tough to do the ball after their Heartmorn travel, but it's still uncertain. But in the meantime, it tells Orem, hey, if you're ready, you can go see the Anger over in the Lucent Spire, which this is like where the noble houses are. And by the way, for your hard work, here's 5 platinum. Go treat yourself to a spa day, which seems a bit random, but it turns out there's a spa near the Loomis house, so they can kind of just treat themselves for all their hard work. Because they're looking pretty, they're looking pretty beat up and rough. So they decide basically, okay, yeah, let's go do our spa day. And Estros does, by the way, hand them like some new like cloaks and like dark clothing to kind of help them with just not, I guess, being so obvious.
Yeah.
Just so they can kind of travel a little bit more stealthily. So they end up heading that way. Chetney does hop into a store called the Prism Emporium and gets a new chisel because he had like thrown it at Ira or something.
Yeah.
Either Ira left with it or it blew up, or I don't remember. And then they go to the Diamond Horizon, which is this bathhouse where they have their spa day. There's a funny detail here where they have the 5 platinum, which is plenty to pay for the spa day for all of them. And Chetney is like, no, I want to pay for it. And they're like, well, why would you pay for it? And he's like, well, I lied to you guys and I need to, I owe you to get your trust back. And Ashton is like, we don't want you to buy our trust back. You need to earn our trust. And Chetney's like, no, I'd rather just pay for it.
Like, I'd much rather buy it.
Yeah, I'd rather just buy your trust again. But so he does pay for their spa day, and they all have a great time. I mean, Fern has a person who typically deals with animals comes and like removes like fleas and ticks from her and gives her like a bubble bath. Orem just waltzes around the place naked. Dorian and Chetney get a like full body deep tissue massage, which Chetney is basically like, that was the single greatest thing I've ever experienced. I had memories that I haven't thought of in years.
Didn't he like break down crying during it?
Yeah. And then there's also like a steam room or maybe even like a bath. I can't remember. And Laudna gets into it and then realizes that like her like body, like fingernails are falling off, and like we're like, ooh, Laudna, get out of the tub, please. So after the spa day, they head over to House Loomis, and it's here that they meet. I think it was Ella Loomis, the matriarch of the family, who introduces them to Ashad Abregio, who is still in his bed, wrapped in bandages, but healthy enough to sit up and talk to the party. Orem mentions that a man by the name of Jarrett in Whitestone was the mutual contact that told the voice of the Tempest about the attack on the Loomis house. And Ashad's like, oh yeah, Jarrett was an old friend. We used to, kind of have journeys and adventures together.
Yeah.
But essentially what happened was the Loomis twins, Balin and I think Zaire, they were sort of these scholarly people. They really were interested in, they called them planar contacts, celestial bodies, stars, and what have you. And they were in the Heartmore because they were meeting with a retired astronomist to really, I guess, share information.
Yeah.
And basically while they were out and about, these 3 covered figures who were so covered they couldn't make out any of their features attacked them, and they had this incredible expertise and just efficiency that really amazed even Ashad and angered him. In hindsight of like, wow, it made him angry to think about like why did this happen really, and who are these people who are so deadly, I guess,
right,
with envenomed weapons and all these things. And he does mention that when one of them were slain, that they basically dissolved into like this black goop.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the twins were killed. Ashad, obviously, because these weapons were envenomed, had a very lengthy healing process. And basically, he didn't know anymore. But if they wanted to know more, Astani, the retired astrologist, apparently did like a full investigation. and that would be the next best place to go. And Orm's kind of like, well, dang, I was really hoping there'd be more information.
Yeah.
And he reveals sort of the story we already know, that they had a similar attack in Zephyr. But he does tell Ashad, like, hey, I will get justice for both of us. So the party, again, they're going down their checklists. Ashton's like, let me go hop over to Gianna's house, tell him, what's going on. Gianna's not in. There's just a very rude door person instead.
He had a great voice.
Yeah. And Ashton basically is like, hey, just pass on a message that, Ashton came by with the new nobodies, because his old group was the nobodies and they skipped town. So like, these are my new nobodies.
Yeah.
And the party kind of likes this, and they're like, oh, that's kind of a nice name. It could be a potential name. We don't know.
Yeah.
But Doran actually has them practice announcing themselves, like arriving at the ball. If you think of like that, the speaker person, like when the guest comes in, they say, announcing these people. So they were practicing, and Laudanum is like, ooh, I want to try. And she does like this very creepy, kind of crazy, like, everyone bend the knee. And he's like, oh, no. That's not what an announcement is. And anyway, their last place to go is the Starpoint Conservatory, because Imogen was given this letter from Estros. They go. Imogen is allowed to enter the conservatory, and it is almost like a massive library with students coming and going. She goes in alone. The rest of the party waits outside. Matt actually mentions that they wait for hours, actually, while she goes through books and studies and all sorts of things about dreams. She finds out all sorts of she reads about all sorts of things about like dreams in general, and particularly about storms, more specifically red storms. She does find one study by a person named Professor Khadija Sumal, and there's a list of people who contributed to the study, and one of them is Liliana Timmelt, which is her mother's name. And that's where the episode ends. That is what happened in episode 11 of Critical Role's Campaign 3. So,
well done.
We made it. Stuff.
We made it.